to rejoice and come in. Keyword being come in. Good morning. Good to see all of you. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we like to say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to one and all. It's great to have you this morning. As always, I want to begin by welcoming all that you bring with you to this space, all of your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, all that make you who you are. We're glad to have you today. This includes those who hear us say this as part of our usual Sunday morning ritual, as well as those who might be hearing it for the first time today. You're equally as welcome and appreciated. And of course, those who are streaming with us this morning, we're also glad to know that you're here with us. So welcome to one and all. A couple of announcements before we greet one another. First of all, for those who know Susan Whaley, Susan's son, you may recall, passed away just a few weeks ago. She called me last night and asked me to let you know that they are having an informal celebration of his life this Thursday from 5 to 7 p.m., and it's going to be in that sitting area outside the convention center, behind the convention center, kind of in between it and the Opera House. Also wanted to make sure you remember, or perhaps find out for the first time, that next Sunday is Spoke Fest. And after 6 years, I finally remember to say something about it the week before. Because Spoke Fest is, there are going to be a lot of bicycles coming up Government Way. And if traffic is open, they'll have it down to just one lane for both sides. So it really takes a long time to get here that direction. And to compound matters, we still have the bridge between here and Northwest Boulevard also blocked off. So your only choice is helicopter. No, you can actually go up Sunset and turn at Hayford past the casino, and that will bring you right around to our church. And that's yeah. I've discovered that, the hard way by going to the casino. No. Huh? The Maxwell will take you to the bridge that's blocked off, and you can come up that way. So Maxwell and on up Sunset to Hayford will also get you here. So just leave in plenty of time. I usually get here earlier than a lot of you because I'm here for the first service as well. And even at 8:30, I have to go around in order to get here. So just plan accordingly. So you know. We'll put out a reminder via email this week as well. So I also, before you greet one another, I think Mariah McKay, I saw her early. There she is. Hey, is going to come up and just say a couple of things about her experience with our religious education program and why you should get involved.
Thanks, Todd. So this is a raw, unscripted testimonial for my experience being born and raised in this congregation and being subject to our fabulous religious education programs here throughout the years. So 3 quick tidbits. First, being a product of the UURE program has made me stronger in my work life. In our office at the Spokane Regional Health District, we did a Strengths Finder personality test, kind of like the Myers-Briggs, but modernized. And there's 30 different strengths, and you take a survey and you get your top 5 strengths. And in public health, we had a lot of people who were strong in command and analysis and achiever. And so I had those in common with my colleagues, but I had this one funny strength that was my number 1 strength that nobody else had, and it was called individuation. And it's not actually what you might think it is. You might think it's someone who goes their own way and is kind of maybe a little contrarian and doesn't run with a pack. But actually, this individuation strength is about being able to see things from other people's point of view and being able to anticipate their needs and their desires and having a strong urge to connect people with the kinds of relationships and jobs and avocations and opportunities that they might be excited about. And I've found that I do that. I compulsively connecting people, and I think it actually had a lot to do with being a UU, actually trying on different lenses, different hats, walking in other people's moccasins, so to speak. I actually remember a little worksheet where there was one situation and we looked at what 8 different people would say about it or perceive. And so it's a skill that it's not something you have or you don't, something you actually build and work on, and have been very fortunate to have that in life. It's contributed to my ability to be resilient in politics. I don't get as exhausted, and I'm not as brittle maybe as some who have a hard time understanding where the opposition's coming from. And in my personal life, I would say, like doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, and parents often shop around for the best opportunities for their children to learn about the world's religions. And I think the UU Church, we might not pretend to be the one true path, but we can at least say we do less harm. So I never, I never had the need to rebel against my church when I was a teenager. I always felt affirmed and supported in seeking my own experiences and truths. And to this day, I'm able to be here and have this continuous experience in my religious home throughout my life, which is something very precious. And I encourage you all to get involved in maintaining a robust religious education program for the young people of our church.
Thank you, Mariah, and I know as a church we are very humbled and honored to even be able to take a small portion of credit for the sort of woman that you have turned out to be. Well, let's take a few moments to say hi to one another. Greet those that you look forward to seeing. I don't know what that was, but yeah, say hi to each other. You get the point. Go. It's such an interesting, the sermon itself kind of does what we're talking about, Just look at things from a new angle.
Yeah, a new lens.
Yeah.
I'm doing a talk in Seattle next month, and it's looking at things through a critical lens.
Yeah.
Very good. You know what? I think she tricked over
Okay, all right.
I'm so careful about it.
I didn't know. I knew I hadn't stepped on anything, so. No problem. Hey. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Okay, I was looking for one more announcement here. I'm embarrassed that I forgot. Jeremy Street just asked me to remind you that at 12:15 today, there is a kind of unusual documentary that's going to be on in our chapel. If you want to, I'm drawing a blank. I want to say the unexplained, but it's unacknowledged. Thank you. Yeah. So that's a kind of new documentary about UFOs and UFOs and kind of an interesting documentary that a lot of people have been waiting to have come out. And Jeremy's going to show it. I saw it. I love that kind of stuff, and it was pretty interesting. So, free showing in the chapel starting at 12:15. All right. I can't remember what else I was going to say, but the UFOs totally have me. I'm talking like UFOs and peyote today, you know? Definitely an altered state of consciousness. Well, now that I'm coming back to this ordinary reality, we will light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness, to say the least, and inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
The opening reflection is from our hymnal. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day.
You may have noticed that we have no screen this morning. We're having some difficulties with that, but it'll be back soon. So we are relying on our hymnals today. So I believe all three of our hymns will be in the gray hymnal, which you should have access to. Our first hymn in service today is number 12, O Life That Maketh All Things New. And it was written by the younger brother of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, which, of course, was a great poet. So these are words from the 1800s, but they are interesting words because they talk about expansive ideas. This man was one of the transcendentalists. So I invite you to stand as you're willing and able to sing number 12, O Life That Maketh All Things New.
Our pilgrim feet I'd like to welcome all children or young at heart, older folks to come forward. And I will warn you, you all have a part in this story. Oh, good. Come on up, sweetheart. Do we have anybody going to join this brave youth? You're it. Way to go.
Sit with you.
Oh, thank you.
Can I sit with you?
Okay. This story is called It's a Book. And as we have we have the big black screen up there. This is a story that I think will tie into that, because I couldn't find one that tied into peyote.
I have some in my office.
Now, part of this story is that I'm going to point to you two and all of you, and when I point, I would like you to say, "It's a book." And you can put as much feeling as you want to into that. Okay? Okay. All right. What do you have there?
It's a book.
How do you scroll down? You don't.
It's a book.
Do you blog with it? No.
It's a book.
You're doing well. Where's your mouse? I don't have one.
It's a book.
Can it text? No.
It's a book.
Tweet? No.
It's a book.
Wi-Fi? No.
It's a book.
You're doing great. Look at what's inside this book. Arr, nodded Long John Silver. We're in agreement then? He unsheathed his broad cutlass, laughing a maniacal laugh. Ha, ha, ha. Jim was petrified. The end was upon him. Then, in the distance, a ship, a wide smile played across the lad's face. So, what else can this book do? Does it need a password? No. Does it need a screen name? No. Are you going to give my book back? No. I'm going to the library. Don't worry, I'll charge it up before I give it back to you. You don't need to. Thank you. And thank you. Let's sing our children out. Thank you.
Offertory reading is also from our hymnal. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream.
Thank you, Michelina. We will now kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. I didn't get any specific requests, but obviously we want to kindle a candle for all who've been impacted by the terrible hurricane that struck Texas and other places earlier this week, as well as those who are fearing the oncoming Irma and what that might become. So let's take a moment of silence thinking of those folks as well as others who might be on your minds this morning, and as always, you'd be welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion.
Please get comfortable for our meditation. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain, and the soft, gentle coming of love.
Since my talk today is on peyote, or refers to peyote at least, which is considered an illicit compound, and in fact it's considered apparently among the worst of illicit drugs because it's a Schedule I, which means it's the most highly restricted there is. Even the pharmaceutical companies don't get to experiment with it. So it makes me wonder about all the other dangerous, addictive compounds out there that are part of our daily life that haven't been put on Schedule I yet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about one from Terence McKenna's Food of the Gods that might need to go next. The nearest analogy to the addictive power of television and the transformation of values that is wrought in the life of the heavy user is probably heroin. Heroin flattens the image. With heroin, things are neither hot nor cold. The addict looks out at the world, certain that whatever is does not matter. The illusion of knowing and of control that heroin engenders is analogous to the unconscious assumption of the television consumer that what is seen is real somewhere in the world. In fact, what is seen are the cosmetically enhanced surfaces of products. Television, while chemically non-invasive, nevertheless is every bit as addictive as the physiologically damaging and physiologically as damaging as any other drug. Don't tell Jeff Sessions. Thank you, Michelina. And before I get into my sermon, I wanted to actually give a little bigger plug for the film Unacknowledged, because I'm afraid I was a little discombobulated, and I may have done Jeremy worse advertisement than it deserved. Because this is one of two documentaries now that has been produced by a doctor. Is it David Greer? Am I remembering David Greer? What's that? Stephen Greer, thank you, who is founder of an organization called the Disclosure Project, which several years ago now had an entire day of public testimony in which extraordinary group of individuals, Air Force pilots and military officials and government workers, got up over a period of about 24 hours and and testified at a news conference that they would be willing to swear before Congress that they had seen some really extraordinary things. And so he's trying to get our government to do what the Soviets and others have done, and that is release their official records on some of these things. And he's produced a couple of documentaries. This is the latest one. So I didn't want to just turn it into sort of a laugh, Jeremy, because it's an interesting subject. I don't know what to think about it, but when I see that many people get up and testify, I always think, wow, how can this many people be delusional? But then I look at who's in office, and reality strikes. Okay, so let's get back to the sermon here, Peyote in the Pulpit. And I want to begin by letting you know about an old Gnostic saying that goes, "The only problem with Yahweh is he thinks he's God." In the Gnostic tradition, Yahweh is the antagonist of the story of Eden because he wants to prevent humanity from becoming independent and aware. The serpent, on the other hand, is considered its hero because it wants people to open their eyes and be able to see for themselves. As Elaine Pagels explains in her best-selling book, The Gnostic Gospels, here the serpent, long known to appear in Gnostic literature as the principle of divine wisdom, convinces Adam and Eve to partake of knowledge while the Lord threatens them with death, trying jealously to prevent them from attaining knowledge and expelling them from paradise when they achieve it. This seems to be the point of other ancient myths too, like when Zeus punishes Prometheus for giving fire, the light of the gods, to humanity so that they can see for themselves, so that they no longer have to blindly obey the thunderous commands of the gods. In mythology, however, the serpent is the one that's the most often associated with illumination. The Hebrew word actually translated as serpent in Genesis actually means shining one, or even diviner. It was not actually a serpent, but Nahash, the shining one, who approaches Eve and asks, "Did Yahweh really say you mustn't eat from the tree of knowledge?" Think about that. Did Yahweh really say you mustn't eat from the tree of knowledge? He said we can eat from any tree but the tree of knowledge, Eve says. We can't even touch it, or he says it will kill us. Kill you? That's a laugh, Shining One scoffs. It most certainly will not kill you. Give it a try and see for yourself. So Eve tastes its delicious fruit, then passes it to Adam, as the story goes, and the eyes of both of them were opened. Of course, it wasn't all good. They had some bad trips too. For the tree of knowledge allowed them to see both good and evil. But at least they could see it for themselves with no further need to have the world interpreted for them by Fox News. I mean, Yahweh. Jeez, pay attention to the script. So what fascinates me about this ancient account, which seems so obvious when I point it out, but so few have ever noticed, is its claim that humanity's original sin was ingesting an illegal, mind-altering, consciousness-expanding plant. The forbidden fruit Shining One promised would open our eyes. When Yahweh finds out about it, he calls Shining One a lowlife, kicks Eve and Adam out of the garden where the mind-altering plants grow, then assigns armed security guards to make sure that they can't get back in. He then tells them that they should be terrified of all Shining Ones and to stomp them dead in any future encounters. Yahweh does this not to protect humanity, but so, as he says in the story, they don't become like one of us, able to think for themselves. When I consider this story in this light, today's international drug war makes perfect sense. For what has become our nation's longest, costliest, deadliest, and most destructive war ever is about a few maintaining power over everyone else. According to the diary of H.R. Haldeman, for example, President Nixon's chief of staff, during a meeting on April 28, 1969, Nixon emphasized that you have to face the fact that the whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this while not appearing to. 6 months later, the Controlled Substance Act was signed into law, allowing the government to arrest, felonize, and politically disenfranchise the voters Nixon most feared: blacks, ostensibly for using heroin, and white youth, ostensibly for smoking marijuana. To date, as I like to put it, U.S. taxpayers have spent over $1 trillion and counting to pay for Nixon's re-election campaign. But the drug war was escalated under Ronald Reagan, who began pouring billions into it after his election in 1980, which is how the era of mass incarceration got started. As Michelle Alexander explains in her book, The New Jim Crow, between 1980 and 2000, the number of people incarcerated in our nation's prisons and jails soared from roughly 300,000 to more than 2 million. I think it's almost 2.5 million today. By the end of 2007, more than 7 million Americans, 1 in every 31 adults, were behind bars, on probation, or parole. 500,000 of them are in for drug-related offenses, compared to only about 40,000 in 1980, and about 80% of whom are simply in for marijuana possession. To put the matter into perspective, Alexander says there are more people in prisons or jails today just for drug offenses than were incarcerated for all reasons in 1980. The majority of these nonviolent drug-related convicts are African American. Nothing, Alexander says, has contributed more to the systematic mass incarceration of people of color in the United States than the war on drugs. To grasp the political impact of all of this, keep in mind that during the 2000 presidential election in Florida, the difference between the number of votes counted, the number of those counted because not all got counted, right? The difference between the number of those counted between Al Gore and George Bush were less than 1 percentage point. Yet, 4.6%, nearly 5% of eligible voters, mostly minorities who would have voted for Gore, couldn't vote, mostly because they had been convicted of nonviolent drug offenses. Keeps a few people in power over everyone else. Just as Yahweh uses weaponized guards, cherubim with fiery swords to keep Eve and Adam from approaching the tree of life after they've gained the ability to determine the difference between right and wrong for themselves, the drug war has led to the militarization of our local police departments and to a new way of preventing blacks in particular from approaching a better way of life even after the Civil Rights Act, even after receiving the right to vote, the power that is to choose the difference between right and wrong for themselves. In addition to the grave injustices resulting from the racist drug war, I'm troubled by its use as a form of mind control. Yahweh doesn't wish his subjects to see for themselves, thus forbidding them to eat from the tree of knowledge. Knowledge is for authoritarians to dispense as they see fit, not for those governed to discover for themselves. Consider this: the most dangerous illicit drugs, like cocaine, crank, speed, crystal meth, opium, OxyContin, fentanyl, PCP, methadone, are all Schedule II. meaning even though they have high risk of harm and addiction, the pharmaceutical industry can still use them. Yet naturally occurring non-addictive low-risk compounds like psilocybin mushrooms, peyote, marijuana, and LSD are Schedule I, meaning the medical and pharmaceutical industries, according to federal law, still, aren't allowed to even conduct research with them. What's often unknown about most of these naturally occurring substances is that the DMT molecule, N-dimethyltryptamine, that makes them psychoactive is also endogenous within our own brains. In other words, we produce small amounts of DMT on our own. It may also surprise you to learn that certain chemical neurotransmitters in our brains, like serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, are shaped exactly like the molecular plant chemicals psilocin, mescaline, and methamphetamine found in peyote, magic mushrooms, and ayahuasca. As anthropologist Jeremy Narby writes, they are like similar keys fitting the same lock. Our brains, think about this, our brains share the same molecular design and chemical makeup as those now illegal plants because we have co-evolved with them. We have grown up together, suggesting they were once so regular a part of our lives that they actually help shape our neurology. Nowadays, since the advent of the drug war, these highly controlled substances are called hallucinogens. But when they were being legally experimented with in the 1960s before the drug war got started, they were considered or called consciousness expanders, which is probably more accurate. As Lynn Margulis and Dorian Sagan say in their book Microcosmos, our seniors on land, plants indeed seem very well at seducing us animals, having tricked us into doing for them one of the few things we can do that they cannot: move. In other words, plants borrow our central nervous systems to help them reproduce and conquer new domains, attracting us with rich colors and pleasing aromas, delicious flavors, and vital nutrients. As Darwin wrote in The Origin of Species, there could have been no flower before there was an eye to see it. For the secret to their success is getting our attention, which is why fruits and flowers explode with color when they're ripe and ready to reproduce, to be eaten by the birds and the bees, and by the bears and by us, so that we carry them with us, their seed with us, wherever we go. And just as we have all heard that carrots are good for our eyes, some plants have even evolved to make us more aware of our environments so we can better find them for ourselves. In short, they have evolved to make us smarter. This is why we reproduce endogenous amounts of DMT and why there are molecular keyholes in our heads that DMT plants can unlock to open our minds, to expand our consciousness. In places around the world where these naturally occurring compounds remain a part of human life and ritual, like in the Peruvian Amazon, they are called the plant teachers, or plant spirits, that work through the shamans who ingest them to bring wisdom to the community and healing to the sick. It is the shaman's job to prepare and to drink ayahuasca, enter the spirit world, then return to the community to share what she or he has learned from the plant teachers. I first became interested in this subject about 13 years ago for reasons I don't have time to go into this morning because it's a long story. But in short, a series of coincidental or synchronistic events led me to drink ayahuasca under the guidance of a Huichol shaman. Although it remains the most profound experience of my life, I've not been compelled to do so again. Not to say that I won't, but to this day I'm still unraveling all I learned and gained from this single encounter with the plant teachers. I do know that it has shaped my understanding of ministry, which is for me a form of shamanism, and helped me to see myself as a shaman. But before I say more about this, let me talk just a little bit about what I believe about the nature of the visions experienced while under the influence of these psychotropic compounds, or more respectfully, under the guidance of the plant teachers. Based upon both my research and limited personal experience in this area, I consider the visions real, by which I mean they are empirically present and physically seen. It's going to take a little unpacking, so stay with me. Because this doesn't mean that I believe, for example, that the snake I saw protruding from the Huichol shaman's third eye was really there, or that the geometric shapes on his clothing really started floating about in midair as he was chanting his Icarus songs, or that he actually disappeared when I saw nothing but space between his poncho and sombrero. What it means is that, as far as I could tell, I was completely aware of what was happening around me, more aware than I'd ever been. I wasn't hallucinating in the sense that I was seeing things not there, but seeing the things that were there in a different way. And I use the term seeing because it turns out these compounds actually stimulate the optic nerves. The visionary experience under the influence are genuinely visual experiences. If I ask you to close your eyes right now and imagine a snake, it's easy to do. But if I ask you to open your eyes and see a snake that's not there, it's nearly impossible. I once heard someone describe these experiences as dreaming while one is awake, which may be pretty accurate. For one is quite aware of the environment that one is in and all that is going on, yet there are many oddities present that aren't usually perceptible. The reason I think these oddities are empirically present is because I believe they are symbolic representations of microscopic, molecular, even quantum realities our usual senses are incapable of perceiving. Just as psychology considers dream images to be symbols of unconscious realities we don't have words or images for on their own, I'm suggesting that DMT-induced images are symbolic representations of realities that our brains don't have the neural pathways for fully imagining. So they compensate with familiar symbols that we can recognize. Thus, instead of DNA, we see entwined snakes. It was anthropologist Jeremy Narby who first discovered this possibility while looking at a collection of paintings by shaman Pablo Amaringo, who was stunned to notice double helixes in many of them. A few weeks later, he showed them to a microbiologist who responded in the same way. Look, there's collagen. And that's that axon's embryonic network with its neurites. Those are triple helixes. And that's DNA from afar, looking like a telephone cord. This looks like chromosomes at a specific phase. There's that spread out form of DNA, and right next to it are DNA spools in their nucleosome structure. In my own experience, like Alice in Wonderland, who immediately shrinks upon drinking a potion, shortly after drinking ayahuasca, I observed everything around me vibrate apart until I myself was a particle floating in a sea of particles. In my case, I saw both snakes and strands of DNA floating by, or at least DNA as depicted, as I've seen depicted in our science books. This only lasted seconds before the world reassembled and I was back to the macroscopic reality we're inhabiting now, also inhabited by a few oddities, to say the least. And this ability to see the world on a microscopic or molecular level helps explain how the ayahuasqueros, or the Peruvian shamans, are able to correctly diagnose and treat the sick, which is why, as Jeremy Narby explains, pharmaceutical companies have a history of going to the Amazon to sample indigenous plant remedies and then returning to their laboratories to synthesize and patent the active ingredients without leaving anything for those who made the original discovery. Narby also points out that 74% of modern pharmacopoeia's plant-based remedies were first discovered by traditional societies. That's an impressive accomplishment for people who are only supposed to be hallucinating. So that's all the theory I'll go into about how I think these psychoactive compounds work. The other thing that I would say is that I've only had the one experience with ayahuasca, and only then within a ritualized setting and with great reverence for the religious nature of my intentions. I have great respect for these compounds and would never use them casually or recreationally. If it were not for what I took as a direct request from the plant teachers themselves, whom I felt reached out to me, opened their door, and invited me in, I would never have partaken at all. Since they've not invited me back, I've not participated again. And the truth is, I have the same reverence for marijuana as a plant teacher, which is why I don't smoke it. And I'd love for the plant teachers to invite me back again, because I'd like to explore more of their unusual world. But even during the one trip, they were reluctant to let me dwell on its wonders. My task at the time was to remain humble and purge myself of all the nonsense in my life. So I spent most of the night tossing my cookies into the green bucket I brought for that purpose. Everything outside the bucket was a wonderland, but the bucket before me was completely normal. And whenever I even peeked beyond its rim, the plant teachers indicated I was supposed to not dwell on the spectacle and needed to get back to work, prostrate myself before the cheap plastic Easter pail I'd picked up at Walgreens on my way to the retreat location. Perhaps they've not invited me back for that same reason, because my work is still in the bucket. In this reality, purging myself of false perceptions and paradigms, and as a shaman, helping others do the same. For those familiar with my sermons, you may have noticed I see the world a little differently than most. And I mean just a little differently, for I see the same world as everyone else, only with a few oddities in it that I'm always happy to point out, in fact, that I feel are my responsibility to point out. Recall just a handful of the sermons I've given this year alone, and you'll understand what I mean. Do you remember a pale blue dot, showing that we are an infinitesimally tiny part of the immense universe? You don't remember that one? I'm going to have to give it again. So talk about helping others experience reality on a molecular level. Or how about swallowing the blue pill? There's a title for you. About our need, especially as a society, to base our beliefs on empirical reality and not just upon our unconscious whims. That was my version of saying, get back to that bucket. Do the work, purge yourselves of false paradigms. Then there was my sermon, Happy's Good Friday, in which I repeatedly called the Bible the binder. a subtle shift helping you to view its reality from an altered state of consciousness. In Look Both Ways Before Crossing the Street, I offered a method for viewing the world in an altered state of consciousness by questioning our own paradigms and always trying to see things, as Mariah reminded us, from different perspectives. I did the same thing just a couple of weeks ago in that sermon called Being Thoughtful, in which I challenged our common mind-heart duality by suggesting that thoughts and feelings are really one event that need to go together. And just a few weeks ago, I gave the sermon, The Naked Emperor, during which I named several false paradigms, several of the ways, that is, that our society deludes itself with lies. Lies like global warming is a hoax or part of a natural cycle, or that we are in a post-racial society and things have gotten so much better since the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, or that there has ever even been such a time as the good old days, or that Obamacare is a disaster, or protecting the environment costs jobs, or that the government is the problem, or that pro-life advocates are actually pro-life, or that ours is a Christian nation. You see, as a shaman, my task isn't to talk about hallucinations and delusions, but about the world we're in, and to help others see it with expanded consciousness. Each time I get up in the pulpit, my intention is to put you in an altered state, to have you walk out saying, I never thought about it like that before. And I will brag just a little, because I don't think a lot of Unitarian Universalist ministers get this. And I think that it is what most attracts Unitarian Universalists. That's why we come. Not to have people dispense the truth, not to talk about things that are going to make us feel warm and fuzzy or good all the time, but because we want our own paradigms challenged. Only instead of passing out peyote, I spend my time delving into philosophy and psychology and science and other disciplines, then bring back what I've discovered to share with you, my community. But none of this has really been about my preaching style. It's about you and your power to be your own shaman by going deeper for yourself, by purging yourself of your own paradigms and learning to see the oddities in the world that so few are willing to look at, let alone even speak about. I'm talking about having the courage to provoke the wrath of the gods by following the serpent's wisdom, eating the forbidden fruit, considering forbidden ideas, speaking about forbidden beliefs, and deciding the difference between which are right and which are wrong for yourself. So many seek experiences that might help them transcend this world. But just as the shaman chants Icarus songs to help keep journeyers tethered to this world so they don't get lost and can find their way back from the realm of the plant teachers, our work is here. Our work is here inside the rim of the bucket, inside the rim of the whole hoop of the world. Thank you.
We're going to end with a short hymn, also written by Samuel Longfellow, by the way, from those Transcendentalists. It's number 345 in your gray hymnal. With joy we claim the growing light, number 345. Please stand as you're willing and able.
The benediction is from the writings of Rumi. Let yourself be drawn by the stronger pull of that which you truly love. Amen, blessed be, salam alaikum, and shalom.